Kia ora, and welcome to Whānau Mārama New Zealand International Film Festival 2024. We've been lucky enough to welcome some extraordinary filmmakers from all corners of the globe to take part in this year's festival, and today's featured artist is no exception. Born and raised in the US and Tokyo, filmmaker Neo Sora brings us a deeply personal piece of cinema with his latest film, Ryuichi Sakamoto Opus, which documents the final performance of his late father, legendary composer and pianist Ryuichi Sakamoto. In this breathtaking film, Sora captures the intimacy of that final performance and offers a unique insight into a dying man's genius. This Q&A was recorded at the Civic Theatre in Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland on Tuesday the 13th of August as part of Whānau Mārama New Zealand International Film Festival 2024. Enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting the Q&A session. First of all, I would like to thank Neo Sora for being here with us. Please, an applause.
Thank you so much for having me.
As a way to start, first of all, this conversation is open to the floor. So if you have questions, remarks, comments, you're more than welcome to participate. You just need to raise your hand and we will be giving you the opportunity to join the conversation. There are mics that are available, so please don't be shy. But as a way to start the conversation, Neo, I just wanted to ask you the obvious question, because of course this is a very personal and intimate kind of film, and I would like to know how it all started, how it all happened. Why is it that you at some point happened to film your father in this very touching private performance?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. It's I've always wanted to come to New Zealand. This is my first time, and I just got here today, but I'm hoping to have a good time. But it's really wonderful to see you all here, and thanks so much for attending this screening. The film started because my father, my parents really wanted to leave something behind while my father still had the energy to perform. He was a little bit too weak to do a concert, of course a traveling concert, but it's even just a normal concert in Japan. He could not really sit through 2 hours of performance straight anymore. And so something that they came up with was to do a concert for film, because we would be able to shoot, a couple of songs per day, and then in the edit, string it together to give the audiences a concert-like experience through cinema. And I just so happen to be a filmmaker, and it's obviously much easier on, when you're sick, I think it's much easier to just have somebody really familiar around you. So I think they came to me to do this film mainly for those kinds of reasons. And I happened to be working, doing pre-production on my first fictional feature film at the time, but I put that on hold because I didn't really want to regret anything, by not doing it. And so I said yes, of course. And then 2 summers ago, I suppose, we shot the film over the course of 8 days in the NHK 509 studios, which is a studio that he really loved the sound of, and it obviously looks really good. So,
you already mentioned some of the choices that were made, like the fact that the film was shot over several days, the specific studio where it was shot. Can you share some of the other principles that guided your filmmaking choices? Were there some ideas that you had from the beginning, like I will do it like this, and you coped with them along the way, or there were other things that happened as it was happening? Were there ideas that you discussed with your father?
We kind of kept In terms of this specific film, I really wanted my role to be as the best conduit for whatever he wanted to do. And so obviously I have my own ideas of cinema and what cinema is. And it's not that I didn't really compromise on any of those necessarily, but I really the starting point was really, what do you want to do? Like, what is it that you are interested in us preserving or showing through this film? And ultimately, he's the one who chose all of the music. And then he left me to basically figure out, what to do about the imagery. Something that I thought about and I discussed with some of my producers and my cinematographer was whether or not to include more traditional documentary material. We talked about maybe incorporating archival material, maybe doing a little bit of interviewing, or a verite style documentary of behind the scenes of the concert. And we shot a little bit of that as well, but ultimately at a certain point, I made the decision to make it as pure of a concert experience as possible. And that's because the impetus for making this film in the first place was so that we can leave behind something that can be experienced as a concert. And so once I made that decision, actually, the filmmaking and the goal was really clear to me, which is to make a film that's like a concert that would give audience members who wouldn't have a chance to see him anymore almost a subjective experience of what it's like to be at a concert of his. Obviously, if it's an objective experience, then maybe it's a camera from far away just looking at him and the piano. And there are a lot of concert videos like that on YouTube and things. But I think because we had the luxury of having a big studio and a big crew and no audience members, actually, we were able to explore a lot of different possibilities using camera movement and editing.
How big was the crew and how many cameras did you have?
The crew was pretty big. It was, I forget exactly, but maybe around 20 to 30 people and 3 cameras. And the production was quite intense because at this point in his life, he was quite interested in silence and the decay of sound. And so, as you saw, there are so many microphones. I think 24 or 30 microphones there. And they were all capturing the kind of quiet decay of the piano sounds into silence. So any kind of noise that the film crew makes is immediately picked up by all these microphones. And so we had 30 crew members all wearing socks, trying not to make any sounds. But what made it extra difficult was that the studio, the 509 Studios in NHK, it's also partially a radio broadcast station, and they didn't allow us to use any wireless equipment. So usually for these kinds of shoots, there's a wireless follow focus, wireless monitoring system. I'm in kind of a side room, watching the wireless feeds and stuff like that, and we couldn't use any of that stuff. So everything was wired. So we had 2 wire wranglers with socks running around, as we were moving the camera, trying not to make any sound. And so it was it's such a quiet and delicate movie, but behind all of that, it's actually all of us freaking out, trying not to make any noise.
Are there already questions from the audience? Please, here in the front row. One.
Hello.
Mike, just a second.
I was just wondering, why did you choose to have in black and white?
That's a great question. One of the themes that I put as the core of the film, I like to make films with generally one through line, a thematic through line. And in this particular film, the through line we decided on was physicality. So, his body was deteriorating, and there were only certain the way, the fact that his body is deteriorating and his muscles aren't working as they used to affects the music that he plays and affects how he plays the music. It affects the speed at which he plays. And so we really wanted to focus on his body. And in doing so, two things came up. One is one really good way to show texture and to show the skin and the wrinkles and also the texture of the piano itself, the body of the piano itself, was to do in black and white, which reduces the amount of visual information there exists, so it reduces the color information so that you can focus more just on these textures. But I also think that also allows us to focus more on the music, which is the most important part of the film. And then in addition to that, something that my father was really thinking about throughout the end of his life was the idea of time and the lack of it. And so another visual through line that we came up with was to represent the film and the lighting of the film as if it were the change of light throughout the course of a day. So it starts in the nighttime, and then gradually it gets brighter and brighter into morning, then midday, then back into night again. And that was also much better expressed, I felt, through black and white. And that also made a lot of things more simple in terms of lighting, and so that was the main reason for black and white.
Hi, I've noticed that when he was playing with single hand, the other hand looks like conducting. Who was he conducting to, or was this his habit?
Yeah, that's just a tick that he had. He would just conduct, and but sometimes he would just conduct music from commercials too, from TV or whatever. Anything that popped into his mind, he would just start to do this. And to be honest, actually, until the very end of his life, like on the hospital bed, he was doing that. So I think it was really ingrained in part of his body. Yeah.
Oh, yes, another question there, fourth row, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Hey. Oh my God, my hands are sweaty. I'm such a big fan. Firstly, super honored, and thank you so much for filming such a masterpiece. I don't even know what to say. But I just had a little curiosity pop up. Was there any remark that your father has said after the film?
You mean after he watched the film, or what do you mean?
Oh, did he get to watch the film?
He watched the final cut, but he didn't watch it with the final color or the final mix.
I see.
But he liked the final cut.
I was thinking maybe after he's done the concert.
After he was really tired. I think it actually took a lot out of him. He got kind of ill afterwards, like even more, and it took a while to kind of build back that energy. And I think maybe you felt it through the screen, but I think that's how much of his kind of life force he put into it. I'm a little, now that I'm saying that, I'm like, I hope the film didn't like kill him faster. But no, I think he was, I read some of his diaries as well, and I think he was really happy to have been able to leave that, but it really did take it out of him afterwards. And he talks about how after the filming was done, he was kind of like empty for a really long time. So,
but maybe you can also ask the other question that you thought she was asking. What did he say, when he saw the film?
This is also a funny story, but the ending of the film, right? It's fairly clear that I was thinking about, when he passes away. And so I was a little bit nervous showing him the film, especially at the end, because it's like, he's died. And then he was like, he watched the end, and then he was like, yeah, it was good, but I'm not dead yet, You killed me. And I'm like, I know, but it had to be this way for the film. Like, sorry. But no, he had a good sense of humor about it.
Another question here in the first row. Just a moment. Okay. Well,
still on the mic. Kia ora. I just wanted to learn a little bit more about your relationship with your father when you were young, and what sort of artistic influence he's had on you as a film director.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to Paolo about this a little bit, but he's a cinephile. He was a really big cinephile. I think since he was in high school in the late 60s in Japan, it was a really great era for film going. People like Godard and Truffaut and Oshima Nagisa and all these people he saw real time. And even before then, I think his first movie-going experience was watching La Strada when he was, 5 or something, on the lap of his mother in a movie theater. And he's always talked about how he could always recall the soundtrack for La Strada, and that's how much of an influence cinema was to even his music. And so when I was a kid, there's a story that I don't really remember, but my parents always told me this, which was he forced me to watch 2001: Space Odyssey when I was 2 years old. I hated it apparently, and was screaming and crying, and he held my eyes, head there. It's like, you have to watch this. And so I'm sure that messed me up in some way. But, throughout the years as well, he would show me Godard. I remember my first Godard film that I watched was Pierrot Le Fou. And that made quite an impression on me. And then beyond that, when I kind of overtook him as a cinephile, I started to introduce him to films as well, some Taiwanese New Wave films and stuff like that. And so we always had a rapport of sending each other things that we were watching or listening to. Of course, he had a much larger breadth of knowledge of music than I was, but he was always extremely curious about what young people were listening to. And so during university years, he would message me on Facebook or whatever and be like, hey, what's the latest? And I would send him anything I was listening to. And what's really annoying, and I still am so annoyed about all this, but is that a couple months later, I would send him an artist I would really like, and then a couple months later, he would be doing a collab with that person, and I'm like, God damn it, that was my person, that was my guy. So yeah, that's the kind of rapport that we had, and so definitely inspired me, greatly to become a filmmaker, but not in not in a direct way necessarily. He didn't push me to do that. But I absorbed a lot of stuff that he gave me.
There was a question here in the first row, please.
Hi, thank you. That was very touching. You've mentioned the fact that when we tend to watch performances like this, even the videos on YouTube, it's a static point of view. And obviously you chose a very dynamic point of view. And I kept thinking about how, despite your father being a very expressive man, ultimately your subject is a man on a piano playing. So what was your process for, let's say for a given piece, for figuring out what shots you were going to do, how you were going to implement them? Because there's some incredible framing in there with a very relatively simple setup, which for 103 minutes is a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm really impressed that so many of you came, actually, because I'm a little bit worried about this sometimes, about I hope it's not boring, and yeah, we, usually for a concert, it ultimately ends up becoming these static shots from really far away on zoom lenses because of the audience, and the audience's experience take top priority. And so for this film, something that I thought a lot about was when I'm in concert, whether it's for classical music or any music really, there's always the moment where you just start to get pulled into the music. And even though you're sitting all the way in the back and, you know, the performers on stage really small, if the music is really good, it feels like you're right next to them. Or if the music is so grand, it looks like it's a landscape. And so those were the kinds of things that, while listening to the set list that he sent me, I was thinking about, and how we can replicate that kind of subjectivity of the audience member, of like being pulled into these moments and feeling so intimate. When a music is so emotional, you feel so connected to the emotions of the performer that you feel like you understand them, you know? And so the goal that me and my DP, Bill Kirstein, set off for ourselves was to try to be as faithful to our own reactions to these songs as possible. Depending on the song, I think we had slightly different approaches. So there's a song called Solitude, which is the soundtrack to a film called Toni Takitani. It's a Japanese film. And that film is really, has a striking use of lateral dolly shots. And so, and you know, I think he composed that with those images in mind. And so in order to pay homage to the film, we also used a lot of lateral dolly shots in that song, which I thought really worked really well for the song as well. And for, I'll give you another example. For there's a song called Obeyed, which to me, that's the first song after it turns into morning. But that song really gives me the impression of this kind of quotidian, everyday life, just like living a similar kind of routine day by day. And that really reminded me of the feeling of watching Ozu's films. And so I used a lot of just really static, composed frames for that song. The only time the camera shifted away from the perspective of the audience members, or this like imagined audience member, was actually the first shot of the film, and then also a similar kind of shot that happens towards the end of the film. But that one actually is my perspective, because that is the view with which I always watched him play piano, from behind. And I always had the experience of, you know, for example, he would be in his studio, in the home studio, and dinner would be ready, or breakfast would be served or something. And it would be my job as a kid to go and call my father. And so I would go up and then sneak up. And then sometimes he would be playing piano. And when that happens, it's really hard to disturb him. You know, you feel like you shouldn't disturb him. So what I did as a kid was to kind of sneak up from behind and then very quietly, slowly try to make my presence felt, while not disturbing him. And so the first shot was that. And after that moment, I kind of transferred the perspective to the audience's perspective. So yeah.
There is time maybe for one last question. Anybody? Here in third row, please.
The little moments of vulnerability when your dad misses a note or when he's obviously tired, did you think in advance that you'd include those, or were they things that just happened and that you felt needed to be part of the film to kind of get across some of that humanity of an older man?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of my goals was to present him playing music just in as dignified a way as possible. So I didn't want to dramatize the film too much with the fact that he was ailing and things like that. And some people, you know, I think have the reaction that there's not enough context to understand like really what's going on with him, which I totally understand as well. And so I think I just wanted to include a little bit of those moments where you just get just enough information that it is actually really difficult for him to do this. You know, he was really pushing hard to record this performance, and I just wanted the audience to know a little bit of that, just enough. So yeah, that's why I kept those in, but largely unplanned. You know, it was in the edit that we discovered those moments and decided to include them.
Well, we ran out of time, so thank you so much to the audience for staying here with us, and
thank you,
Neil, for the insight on
course.
Ryuichi Sakamoto Opus.
Thank you very much.